famous Assyrian patriot in 1908 started Al-Intibah, a religious association, and in 1909 brought to life the well-known magazine Kuchva de Medencha, Star of the East, both very well-known establishments to our people. One of the things that he always preached of was the necessity of schools, printing presses, magazines, as he describes them, being the tools for survival and building nationalism amongst the youth. With the increasing oppression against his people in our homeland, he decided to immigrate to the U.S., and so he did in 1912 with the help of his loyal friend, Sanharib Bali, who wrote about him as follows. Before him, many people came, but they all took from the Assyrian culture and translated it to other languages. But he distinguished himself by translating from other languages to Assyrian. Thus, while others were exchanging our heritage, he was adding to it. In the United States, he started the Journal of Bet Nahrain in 1916, published in Syriac, Arabic, and Turkish, which he dedicated to the Assyrian people. In 1921, he was asked to be the chief editor of the magazine Huyada, published by the Chaldo-Assyrian National Association, which he did until it stopped. Then he returned to issue Bet Nahrain again until his last days. He believed that the interest of the Assyrian nation should always be put ahead of personal interest. Yes, he was born poor, but because of his beliefs, he lived poor and died poor. But what he left is a wealth that money cannot buy. He left an awakening in the Assyrian nation, an awakening which has taken roots in us as people of one origin, with distinct heritage and culture and the right to shape our own destiny. He deserved the title Malfono. He is our beloved poet and founder of Assyrian Renaissance. He passed away on February 5th, 1930, but forever will be in our hearts an Assyrian legend. His most famous poem is titled Awake, Son of Assyria. Awake. Awake, son of Assyria. Awake and see the world, how enlightened. The chance is fleeting from us, and time is running out. Awake, son of Assyria. Awake. In vengeance you will take refuge. Rise up and band together to strengthen. And if one does not awake, we have lost our chance. Without the purpose, misfortune will befall our land. The above-mentioned patriot is wish of the following: General Agapotros, Dr. Fred Arturaya, Naum Fab, Malik Khoshaba. The Assyrian Empire dominated Mesopotamia and all of the Near East for the first half of the first millennium, led by a series of highly ambitious and aggressive warrior kings. As a result of these fierce and successful military campaigns, the Assyrians acquired massive resources from all over the Near East, which made Assyria wealthy. This wealth allowed them to build palaces on an entirely new scale of size and glamour. One contemporary text describes the inauguration of this specific palace, to which almost 70,000 people were invited to banquet. The palace mentioned above is which of the following: Palace of Kalu, built by Ashur-nasir-pal II, the Assyrian Palace in Uruk, the Assyrian Palace in Nimrud, the Assyrian Palace in Ashur. One day, this Assyrian king, always looking for adventure, proposes that he and his friend travel to the distant cedar forest to kill Huwaba, its evil guardian. His friend protests that the journey is very dangerous and Huwaba very fierce, but the king is determined, and finally they set out. The undertaking is successful and the two are covered with glory. But his friend has already had premonitions of disaster. On their return to Uruk, the goddess Ishtar sees the beauty of the king and proposes to him. He rejects her, reminding her of the fates of her previous lovers. She is furious and has Anu send the sacred bull of heaven to attack him. When the king and his friend slay the bull, the gods become very angry. This is too presumptuous. As punishment, his friend must die. His friend's death is the occasion for this section, which we have included here, the climax and culmination of the epic. For the first time, the king has had to face the fact of death, and it bewilders him and terrifies him. Hoping to learn the secret of immortality, he makes a long and difficult journey in search of Utnapishtim, the one human being who has acquired it. Utnapishtim tells his story, the famous story of the flood. But the king is after all human and very tired. He falls asleep. Utnapishtim is about to send him away when his wife intervenes in pity. The king is told about a wonderful plant of immortality that grows at the bottom of the sea. He obtains it, but as he stops to cool himself in a quiet pool, a snake carries off the plant. The king, completely unsuccessful, returns to Uruk, and the text concludes as he proudly shows his city to his ferrymen. Thus the secret of immortality is lost to man forever. The above-mentioned king and his friend are which of the following? Keldu and Ashur, Marduk and Tiamat, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, Nabu and Jilu. This medication was discovered in 1853, and a few years later started being used to treat headaches. It has since seen expanded use as a fever suppressor and preventative agent against strokes and heart attacks, to name a few of its usages. It is arguably one of the greatest therapies discovered because of its expanded and continued use, not to mention that many of us have used it at some point in our lives. But you may be interested to know that a derivative of this important drug was actually used thousands of years earlier. Early records show that it was used as a treatment in ancient Assyria. For example, Asclepus crushed a daru poplar seed, which contained a derivative of this medicine, to treat patients suffering from headaches. Amazing. The medicine mentioned above is which of the following? Tylenol, aspirin, marijuana, or ibuprofen. The lens is a 3,000-year-old piece of rock crystal which was unearthed by Sir John Layard in 1850 at an Assyrian palace in modern-day Iraq. Since its discovery over a century ago, scientists and historians have debated its use, with one prominent Italian professor claiming the lens was used by the ancient Assyrians as part of a telescope, which would explain how the Assyrians knew so much about astronomy. This lens, also called the Layard lens, which has been dated to between 750 and 710 BC, is made from natural rock crystal and is slightly oval in shape. It was roughly ground, perhaps on a lapidary wheel. It has a focal point about 11 centimeters from the flat side and a focal length of about 12 centimeters. This would make it equivalent to a 3-time magnification glass. Combined with another lens, it could achieve much greater magnification. The surface of the lens has 12 cavities that were opened during grinding, which would have contained naphtha or some other fluid trapped in the raw crystal. The lens is said to be able to focus sunlight, although the focus is far from perfect. There has been much debate over the original use of this lens. Some speculate that it was used as a magnifying glass or as a burning glass to start fires where concentrating sunlight, while others have proposed that the lens was part of a telescope. However, if we were to believe the British Museum's description, this lens would have been of little or no practical use, and while they acknowledge that this piece of rock crystal has been carefully ground and polished and undoubtedly has optical properties, they reached the unusual conclusion that the optical properties were probably accidental. I wonder if the British Museum also maintains that the hundreds of other carefully crafted and polished lenses found throughout the ancient world were also accidental. The British Museum finished by saying that there is no evidence that the Assyrians used lenses either for magnification or for making fire, and it is much more likely that this is a piece of inlay, perhaps for furniture. However, many disagree with this claim. Sir John Layard suggested that Assyrian craftsmen used the lens as a magnifying glass to make intricate and minuscule engravings, such as those that have been found on seals and on clay tablets using a wedge-shaped script. But experts on Assyrian archaeology are unconvinced. They say that the lens is of such low quality that it would have been a poor aid to vision. One of the reasons Petinato believed that the Assyrians used this lens as part of a telescope is that some of their knowledge about astronomy seems impossible to have acquired without a telescope. For example, the ancient Assyrians saw the planet Saturn as a god surrounded by a ring of serpents, which Petinato suggests was their interpretation of Saturn's rings as seen through a telescope. However, other experts say that serpents occur frequently in Assyrian mythology, and note that there is no mention of a telescope in any of the many surviving Assyrian astronomical writings. This lens is which one of the following? The astro lens, the Assyrian lens, the lens of Babel, the Nimrod lens. A taut telephone wire extends 41 feet from the tip of a telephone pole to a stake in the ground 9 feet away. How tall is the telephone pole? Match the king with the corresponding accomplishment. King Ashurbanipal, King Hammurabi, King Tiglath-Pileser III, King Esarhaddon. Gift certificates of $50 for the first 3 students who answered the previous 2 questions correctly. Email your answers to drdavidson@gmail.com. Thank you for your time.